Oh, it was such a nourishing conversation for me. Because it helped me, not only did it help me solidify a lot of my thoughts, but it gave me some new insights. I got to reconnect with you. I'm realizing more and more that I get to be a bridge for people. And at first I wasn't sure how I felt about that. But then I recognized it's really important, because most of my conversations that I'm having now are with non-Black people. Yeah. And I want people to see that it's possible to have beautiful conversations with one another when you're just willing to show up with candor and compassion and authenticity and say, hey, here's my experience.
Hello, friends. It is Irene Lyon here. Thank you for pressing play. If you're watching this on a video source like YouTube or an audio source, thank you. What you just heard was the ending, actually, of this long form interview that I had with my friend Donnie Hill. He said that little bit that you just heard at the very end of our conversation, and I asked him if I could put that to the start. He said yes, so wanted to start with that. And just let you know that we've known each other for a few years. We met at a coaching conference thing about, I think it was back in 2013, 2014. We have been connected through social media ever since, and we came together. We became friends out of our interest and love of the nervous system and healing trauma. And we get into Donnie's story of healing his own trauma, the work he's done to help others heal and work with their own pains and humanity. And I reached out to him about a week or so ago with all of the energy that has been mounting and building around the Black communities. Specifically, I'm keeping this local here in North America, specifically the United States, and really just the growing awareness of how we are still fighting for basic human rights of the Black communities and their need to be heard and seen and heal and have conversations, and for us to learn and listen. So I was really touched by his shares on social media, our interaction privately, and I said, let's have a chat, let's talk, let's have a conversation. So welcome to this long-form conversation with my dear friend, Donnie Hill.
Thank you for chatting, and it's so good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. It's been a few years, so I'm really glad we got to reconnect.
Yes, 100%. And it's a fascinating time, and it's today is June 5th, 2020. So of course, what we talk about today gets captured now, but then it's listened to again and again. But right now, there's a lot of intensity in the world, specifically in the United States. And I'll just be honest to everyone listening. I was confronted with something that I didn't know what to do with, and I was like, I'm going to ask Donnie what he thinks about this. And I won't go into the details, but I was in some ways not bullied, that's not the right word, but really it was a heated, why aren't you talking more about what's going on with racism and discrimination and everything in the United States. And it felt like a push to force me to do something that I wasn't even sure what to say, how to say, and there's almost this element of, I'm going to say this quite frankly, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because there's always going to be something that's not quite perfect for someone. And and so, and I haven't actually yet in this last week, because I still have a job to do, still work. And how we originally connected was around the nervous system work. right? We were at the same business conference, and I was doing a little presentation on the nervous system, and you were one of, and we were talking about this before. Maybe we'll talk about this. You were one of 3 people out of about 100, if not more, Donnie, that came up to me afterwards and asked me more questions about the nervous system and trauma. And so you're like, I'm like, to you, I'm just like, oh, thank you. Another young person, because I don't know how you all are now, but I think you're younger than me. I'm 46. So I was like, oh, this is so good. Like, the young people have to get this into their systems, because we need to change how we react and go into survival. So I'm saying that because when I received a few of these messages, it wasn't hundreds, you know, it was just a few. I felt in my physiology, Donnie, a reaction and an anger, even like a how dare you?
Yeah.
You know, it really it hurt. And being a human that has a mother who is of color, she's Filipino, she's not Black, but you know, people thought she wasn't my mom when I was young, and that hurt. You know, I get even a little bit of a tear there. And living where we were in the suburbs of Vancouver, it was just not a thing back then. I mean, that seems weird, but I was the only kiddo in my school that had a mama that wasn't white. Other than, of course, the families that were, you know, we have so much ethnicity with Chinese and East Indian. And anyway, so I reached out to you, and you wrote something that I think was really lovely in the DM. And then I started going through some of your posts. But you said to me, it was initially hard for me to speak on what's happening right now. Right. And so that there was a bit of solace and like, okay. And even
you're not alone.
Yeah, and even another one of your posts, you know, I just read them and it helped me, because even you had said, I've taken a while to collect my thoughts, because I think we're in the same line that we don't want to react, we don't want to traumatize ourselves more, and we don't want to talk without clear communication and from a sense of our essence.
Yes. Yeah.
So you said, you know, it's hard for me to speak right now because I look at things through energy and alignment. And although many in the Black community are suffering, my actual day-to-day life is really good and really peaceful, very peaceful. So although I'm part of the collective, I'm having a different experience than those who are in anger and rage. So I'm constantly trying to find the balance of compassion, helpfulness, and acknowledgement. You've done a lot of healing work. I know that.
Yeah, well, part of it was the fact that I had to. I think I grew up in Mobile, Alabama. I was born and raised there and lived there until I was 18. And then I moved out into the Bay Area when I was 18 for school. And I spent so much of my life hiding and rearranging because I'm also gay. And so nowhere in my being did I feel safe or did I feel like I belonged, because I went to a predominantly white school. So I didn't belong in the white community, obviously because I was Black. And then I had 4 other classmates who were Black. And so they got my experience, but they were more rooted in the Black community. And when I went into the Black community, I wasn't Black enough, or because I was gay, it was, oh, you were the sissy. And so
that you weren't Black enough to be in the community.
Yeah.
Ouch.
I spoke well.
I'm sorry. Wow.
And I appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. So that was your experience of leaving the nest, so to speak.
That was my experience of leaving the nest. And so I carried all of that with me into my adulthood. And so a lot of my my approach to life up to that point was about finding ways to fit in or finding ways to connect. In a lot of ways, I disconnected from my real essence and who I was. And I didn't realize that until I got to college and really started struggling with depression and anxiety. And it got to the point where when I was 20, I was in and out of the hospital for a bunch of medical issues, from voice issues to stomach problems. I had surgeries on my knee, so I was physically falling apart.
You were on
and yeah. And then at the depression and the just yuck gunk with that, I wanted to commit suicide at 20. And I remember sitting in the hospital bed, and the psychiatrist came in, and he started asking me a series of questions. And the last question he asked me was, would you like to stay at the hospital? And it took me a minute to collect myself. And so I just nodded my head and say, great, I'll bring in the nurse, and we'll get the paper signed, and we'll take you upstairs. And so I checked myself into the hospital for a week. And it was one of the best experiences that I had, because one, it allowed me to see I wasn't the only one struggling. A lot of people were struggling. Yeah. But also, that was the moment where I really made the decision to be honest with myself and say, all right, it's time for me to actually live my life. And so all of this stuff ended up surfacing that was either around anger or sadness or grief, or what was true for me or what wasn't true for me, or generational baggage or familial baggage or societal baggage. And over the years, I've just had to unpack all of that. And to answer your question, I'm now 33.
Okay. I knew you weren't my age, but I knew you were younger. Okay. So, I mean, and I want to continue with that, but the fact that people always say often, I'm glad I got sick, or I'm glad this occurred, because I wouldn't have realized how unwell I was internally. And we know this now with research around especially early trauma and chronic stress. It makes our insides sick, and so that's what was happening with you. But I think the fact that happened so young for you is amazing, Donnie, because for a lot of people it doesn't happen until they're in their 50s, 60s, and then it can be, not that it's impossible, but it's a bit harder to unwind the wires and the programs. So that time in that hospital, so it was a week you stayed?
Yeah.
Quite the powerful week.
It was quite a powerful week. I did more drawing and healing work that week than I had in a lifetime at that point.
Wow.
And I remember it must have been when I moved out of the dorm. I packed all of my stuff, and there was a painting that I made in that week. And originally I was going to throw it away and say, no, I want to keep it. I want to have this with me. And maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I was cleaning out our shed and went through it and found that painting and realized just how far I had come from that moment. And it was such a deeply moving experience, because I realized, I didn't just talk about doing the work. I actually did the work.
Yeah.
And realized, I'm in a very different place, and it's been gratifying.
Yeah.
It's been really, really gratifying.
May I ask what was the painting of, just before? If you can share, if it's something abstract or.
It was, I ended up doing a painting of my hand. And I did an outline, and I did it in a bunch of different colors. And what I realized maybe a few years ago is that the colors I used were the colors of the different chakras.
But you didn't know about the chakras then, did you?
No.
Sort of the rainbow colors.
Yeah.
That's Awesome. Thank you. I just was curious. I was in my mind, I'm like, what was it?
Yeah, it was my hand.
Great. So you were going to say something. I cut you off a little bit there, but.
Oh, I was going to say, so when we met, I had just finished my cancer coaching certification and was starting to work with patients. And a lot of that work was around dealing with the emotional side of a cancer journey. So how do you deal with anger and resentment and rage and sadness and grief, and really having tools to process that and helping my clients at the time process that. And what I loved about your work, and part of the reason why I went up to you, was because your work had the science side to the stuff that I was doing, but I didn't know how to articulate it in that way.
Got it.
And so it was this beautiful combination of, oh, I'm not just doing something woo. What I'm sharing with people is, it has some like substance behind it.
It's interesting you say that. My husband Seth said the same thing when we met, which was he was doing more spiritual, energy, emotional work, processing, feeling, just going with the body and the sensation, but he didn't exactly what you just said, actually, almost to the T. He said when we started to talk, I was, wow, this actually is, I hate to say this, but real. And we need sometimes that science to, in some strange way, prove our experience is true, which is weird and screwed up in itself.
For sure.
Because it's showing how we've completely moved away from that natural nature of our essence is as not just humans, but organisms that have inner workings that actually know how to work really well when we just leave them alone and nurture them.
Yeah.
So curious, the cancer coaching program, how did you get into that, and what was the guiding light to that?
I no longer believe in synchronicities. At the time, I was working for a presentation skills company, and I wanted to be a coach, or I was starting to get introduced to the world of coaching. I was thinking, oh my God, this is powerful stuff and it's wonderful. And at that time, I had a coach, and she also knew that I was interested in medicine. I originally planned on being a physician, and then I got to biochemistry and realized that wasn't in my future.
I know what you mean, Donnie. Physics killed me. There was no way.
And I thought, yeah, maybe in another lifetime, that will be my path. But she was developing this cancer coaching training program. And she said, because of your background and your interest, I think this could be a really cool combination for you. You might want to just check it out and let me know what you think.
Mm-hmm.
So she sent me over like the 2-page handout, and I think the retreat was coming up. I called my dad and said, oh, Dad, there's this new cancer coach training that one of my mentors is doing. I would love to do it. It's this amount of money. Are you willing to make this investment for me? And he's like, well, yeah, I guess. Just tell me what you need. So I said yes, and I called Carrie, and she said, I'm going to send you the application. Just know you have to apply, and then we'll go through your application and make a decision and go from there. So I said, okay. So I submitted everything, and then I got a call from Carrie, and she said, well, I just want to let you know that you're going to be one of our first cancer coach trainees. Congratulations. Yeah. Oh, great. Fantastic.
Yeah.
And then a week later, my mom got her diagnosis.
Wow.
So for me, it was this moment of, I'm about to get the tools I need and the support I need to not only take myself through this as one of her caregivers, but also to walk her through this and walk my family through it. And so it was a really strange but beautiful experience. And my mom is doing well. Most people ask, like, is she still okay? She's doing really well.
That's amazing. Good.
And because she was my first person, in a lot of ways, it made that work so much easier, because the very first conversation that I had with her was around death the night before she went into her surgery. So I was like, oh, we're going really deeply, really quickly. And it gave me the tools to have not only those meaningful conversations and deep conversations about things that are really uncomfortable for a lot of people, but it also just gave me the capacity and the tools to be with people in a bunch of different ways. And I didn't really know where that would take me in my work. And then now roll to June 5th, 2020. And even though I'm not doing the cancer coaching work, and I haven't been for a number of years, those tools that I have in my toolkit are needed now more than ever. And so I'm getting to come back to the work, but in a very different way.
Let's talk about that, because that was another thing that I read on your Facebook, one of your posts, around how important that work, because you were not with cancer, you weren't healing, it was what you chose to go into, which is actually, is that rare? Like, usually if someone goes into a profession, it's because they've healed that and I want to help other people. So I think what you said, no such thing as synchronicity, obviously, with your mama. So you had mentioned, the anger, you processed rage, all of the old, the junk, the yuck. And in context to current time, you had mentioned, I'm just going to read this because I'm not going to paraphrase it right so well. Let me just find it here. It was on June 2nd. I'm going to read a little bit. So,
okay.
I don't want to cut this off, because I think what you read is really important. So I hope that's okay that I read a little bit more than just a sentence. So
sure.
Go into, it's like reading time. So you said, from conversations with friends and family and interactions on social channels, I'm clear about this. The Black soul spirit is tired. Tired of fighting, tired of injustice, tired of explaining, tired of defending, tired of repeating, tired of grieving, just tired. And although rage, anger, and sorrow are important, useful signals, and sometimes necessary, they are not sustainable for anybody. And that's so on point. To go back to the nervous system work that we connected with originally, one is not meant to stay in survival mode indefinitely. It breaks us down, right? It makes us sick. It makes us not see clearly. We can't be empathetic when we're in survival mode, whether we're in fight, flight mode, or in shutdown mode. So I love this. It's one thing to tear shit up. It feels good, which is true. It's cathartic, but at some point there's going to come a time when we also have to rebuild. That takes energy, effort, planning, visioning, and executing too. Centuries of mistreatment, prejudice, injustice, exclusion, violence, murder, ignorance, appropriation, sexism, lack of empathy, and vitriol are not going to magically go away. Conversations have to be had. Feelings need to be let out. I'm going to say that one more time. Feelings need to be let out. It's all part of a process, and it's messy boots. I've never heard that saying before, but I really liked it. And then you mentioned, so my family, friends, and community, take care of yourself. Like that, I want to put a period in that one. Like, take care of yourself. When and where possible, make sure you have time to rest, not just at the physical level, but at the soul, energetic level, because you cannot build a life and future from exhaustion. Amen to that. You won't be able to maintain it. And then this is where the cancer coaching program part comes in. Several years ago, when I went through my cancer coaching program, there was a segment within the training around how to move through the tiers of emotion, particularly resentment, anger, and rage. Full transparency, I hated it. It was uncomfortable for me because it pressed up against every ounce of my trauma and conditioning as a Southern raised Black man. That said, I didn't realize how much I needed that skill and would appreciate that training until these past few days. You know, I really appreciate this. And it again goes to that piece of we can't stay in survival. And right now we're seeing a lot of that. And we know why that's there, because many haven't gotten to those deep wounds and processed them without hurting others and hurting themselves more. So could you speak to just that?
Yeah.
I know it's a lot to
Yeah.
so.
No, I was just having a conversation with a friend of mine. And I made the analogy of this. My part of my experience growing up as a little kid is we would take family road trips to Destin or Panama City.
Okay.
And along the way, we'd make a few pit stops, whether at the gas station or a rest stop, just to stretch our legs, etc.
Yeah.
And I told him today, I realized, oh, anger and rage are one of those rest stops, but they shouldn't be the final destination.
Uh-huh. Great analogy.
And when I think about that in my own personal experience, I don't want to be angry. That's not how I want to move through the world, because it's not healthy for me. But it's also not healthy for my relationships. It's not healthy for the work that I want to do in the world. Like, I just don't have any capacity to build and create and move forward when I'm just stuck in rage and anger. Mm-hmm. And so although I understand why people are in that place.
Yes.
And I know what it's like to lose family members who have been gunned down. Mm-hmm. I think it's also really important to figure out for yourself as an individual, how do you move forward? At some point, you're going to have to make that rest stop through anger and rage. But then what's the final destination? If you're trying to come back to peace, how do you get back to peace? How do you find the tools and the support and have the conversations that you need in order to get there? But at some point you have to get back into the car and go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I think part of the reason why I wrote that was for a reminder for myself of, okay, you know that this is going to be the rest stop, and you might be here today, or you might go back to it next week or a few months, and that's okay. But at some point you need to take what's there and say, all right, what am I learning about this, or what do I need to come back to about this? Is it something that I need to say? Is it a different action that I need to take? Do I need to be more transparent and truthful with people? This past week, I've had more honest conversations with people than I've had in a really, really long time. And part of it has been just the willingness to speak candidly, to say, all right, hey, this isn't working, or this is working, and here's why I love you, or here's why I appreciate you, or, you know, here's the piece that's uncomfortable for me. And the messy boots part is those conversations are messy, because there's no how-to guide, there's no right way, there's no easy entry point into the conversation or into this new place. And so you just have to know that you can just start, and then as you start, you can redirect and just pivot and flex and pivot and flex and pivot and flex. And so those are kind of my thoughts around around what I wrote a few days ago.
Yeah. The conversations that you were having with, people, friends, how did they get primed, without going into obviously personal detail, but was it, what was what was the essence or the taste that was happening? I mean, obviously we're all being primed to learn. I hope everyone's wanting to learn. What was it that primed it, out of curiosity? Or the variations, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So I think there have been a total of 7 conversations. Mm-hmm. 6 of them have been from white friends, sure, male and female. Mm-hmm. 1 has been with an Asian friend. Mm-hmm. But the way that they got primed were, they either send me a text message, they send me a message on Facebook, or they send me an email. And the essence of the email was, I don't know what to say or how you feel, but I would like to have a conversation with you. Mm. Are you open to it? Or am I stepping out of bounds? And for me, I'm like, of course not. I want to have a conversation. Yeah. That is the whole point of this. And then we would get into the conversation and they would ask me, how are you doing? Or what's good about what's happening? Or what's good in your world? What's bad in your world? What's ugly in your world? Mm-hmm. And that is such a beautiful way for me personally to go into the conversation, because it reminds me, there are things that are still really good in my day-to-day life. And I need to find opportunities to point those out and recognize those for myself, because they help me ground in some level of stability and balance. And then when it gets into the bad or the ugly parts, for me, a lot of how I go into that is, look, it's not about you understanding or what it's like to be a Black man. Like, you're just not going to get that because you're a white man or you're a white woman. Like, and just like I can't understand what it's going to be like on your end. And I think the opportunity there is really just figuring out, where do we have overlap? And some of that overlap has been, okay, well, we have families. All right, well, I want to enjoy my time with my family, just like you want to enjoy time with your family. Or our work. You want to do meaningful work? I also want to do meaningful work. Yeah. And it's really using those connection points to initiate the conversation, and then saying, okay, or asking, how has your experience been different? And then listening to one another. And so it's really been this beautiful back and forth of just sharing experiences, not getting someone to say, I understand the experience. And that it's been beautiful. And I think that's part of the reason why I feel more energized today is, I'm getting to have the conversations that I've been wanting to have.
For a long time, probably.
For a long time. For a really long time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And of course, I was one of those people that reached out, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna segue back to something, and then I want to go back. So this,
okay.
This isn't to screw the line of thought, but I was speaking to someone yesterday, a friend of mine who's a soul mentor. He works with the soul, and he used to be a priest. I'll be sure to send you the interview because you'll really enjoy it. But he was talking about, we were talking about intergenerational trauma and land. So, and just how a building, a country, an area of land will hold the energy of what's occurred on that land, you know? And I know you understand that, you know, you and I, we were talking about going into, I brought one of my staff members into a church, the first church she'd ever been into in New York City last year, which blew my mind.
Wow.
I was raised Roman Catholic, and I don't practice that kind of faith now, but you know, if it's a hot day and there's a church and the doors are open, you go into that church to cool down because, you know, you're allowed. You don't have to pay an admission fee. You don't need to buy a coffee to use the bathroom. You can just go in.
Yeah.
You know, and he didn't know that. It was so sweet. And it was like 1 a.m. in Manhattan. It was hot. It was so hot. And, you know, we're from Pacific Northwest where we're not used to that heat. He was like, and the doors were open. He's like, are we allowed to go in? I'm like, of course we're allowed to go in. You know, like, it's a church. Anyway, he was in awe and the energy. And of course, the churches had their bad things too, obviously. But you could feel just the calmness, and people have grieved and prayed and wished and watched baptisms and funerals and all the energy. And so that was in my mind this morning. And as I was sort of just feeling into our chat and what we were going to talk about in the week, I actually went back to the traumas that have occurred in Canada that I was never taught in school. No one was taught about the residential schools that the Indigenous populations were put into to try to bleach their culture and language and out of them. I was not told about the Japanese internment camps after World War II, where 22,000 Japanese were literally shipped into the interior of British Columbia to live in like camps that were like Nazi concentration camps. You know, they weren't exterminated, but they were shunned. And I went back to the time when our government finally apologized for the Japanese camps. And I watched it and I just started crying because I'm in British Columbia. We have a very large Japanese population here just because of the, you know, where we are. And I felt it like, and it really landed. And I just thought, wow, I was never taught that. It wasn't in our history books. We learned about Europe and Egypt and the Mayans and, you know, but not that. And I thought to myself, because a lot of people are asking, what should I do? How can I help? And what I really felt into, and I'd love to hear this from your side, Donnie, is I wonder if those that are struggling to know how to help haven't landed on the traumas that have occurred on their land masses where they were born and raised. Because it doesn't negate what, and I'm pointing that way because South is that way right now. So you're over there in San Francisco, but it's like things are different when you have borders and governments and rules and laws. And I really, I felt a cleansing and a sadness and a grief. And it was so amazing to watch the government, the prime minister at the time, apologize. One of the other individuals in parliament broke down crying because his wife was Japanese, his first wife. It was just, I thought, isn't that interesting? So, you know, it's this part of what if we have to dig into our own personal traumas as a starting point so that we can collectively come together and talk about all of our generational trauma. Not one is worse than the other, you know, and some, it seems worse, but from the nervous system point of view, it's still terror and fear.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. It does. So my parents grew up in Alabama in the 60s and 70s. And my dad would tell me about some of his experiences when I was a little kid. And as you were talking about it, I feel like there was a part of me that I turned that knob down because I didn't want to fully feel the pain of it.
Yes.
And what I think is happening right now is, you know, not only are we turning the knob back up, but we're asking everybody to turn the knob up.
Yeah.
And I think we're at this pivot point as a collective where the theme of 2020 for me has been empathy and connection. And everything that's happening between the pandemic and the protests and the racial divide is really about how do we practice having more empathy for one another and deepen the connection. But we're having to actually really look at all of this intergenerational trauma and own our parts of it. As young people, my parents are having to own theirs, you're having to own yours, your parents are having to own, and everybody is in this deep state of like just being burst open. And feel all of the things that we've just been pushing down for so long. And so I think there's something so beautiful about what you just shared. Is what if we made the decision to lean into more of the pain and to lean into more of the trauma, whether it's in our land, whether it's in our family, whether it's in us as individuals, because there's something there that we have to connect to or recognize for ourselves in order to move forward. And until we actually connect to it, it's going to be really difficult to move forward because you're just trying to pretend that something isn't there when it's still eating away.
100%. You know, what you just said about, you know, everything's the knob is being turned up, the volume is being turned up, and it's breaking everyone open. That's true. And I will say there are a lot of people who are refusing to break open. And I wasn't sure if I was going to mention this, but I will, because hey, let's have the difficult talk. But before I got on the line with you again, you know, I was listening. I was scrolling through Facebook, and I saw. I don't know who she was. She's clearly someone who has some following because there are a lot of views. But a Black woman. I don't know where she was living. In the United States, she had to go to the drugstore to get some sinus medication because she had allergies bothering her. And it was a beautiful day. She went, and she was, we don't have this here, but apparently there's a drive-through that you can go to at Walgreens to get that medicine. And she was waiting to get it. And she noticed this man behind her in the car who was white and just started staring at her. And while she was telling the story, Donnie, she was crying and she talked to her brother, like, should I share this? He's like, yes, you have to share this. So that's why I want to share it. And so she was watching him. And then he got out of the car and he stood and stared at her. And then he went to the trunk, and I don't know the significance of this. And I didn't have time to look it up, but he got out a watermelon and showed it to her. So I'd like to hear from you what that is. And then he came up to her and he started to do monkey sounds, like cocking like a primate, a monkey, a chimp would. And she was already vigilant. You know, God only knows what someone's going to do when they go to a trunk of a car. I mean, I was waiting for something bigger than that, than a watermelon. And I thought to myself, because I am someone, and I think you will be too, who we understand why people harm others. They don't have empathy. They've been harmed themselves. They live in rigidity. And so I thought, you know, I'm going to ask Donnie about this, I think, because that man, and a lot of people will disagree with me here, he probably wasn't born as a baby wanting to hate. Maybe maybe his generations, and of course, if we think about colonialism and all, how we, the white person colonized the United States and the Spaniards colonized so much more, and so yes, there's that thread. But typically, when a organism is born, when a baby is born, they're not thinking that, because they're not thinking yet. They can't. It's all somatic, but there is an essence. And so I thought about that. I'm like, is it possible for someone who has that ability, that lack of empathy, to do that? Is someone like that ever going to be able to find any healing? And I say that because I get a lot of my students sad that there's a lot of people that are going to die never having healed chronic illness because they learned about the work too long. And there's been millions of people that have died without ever healing their illnesses because they didn't know how to do the trauma work, the healing work, like you and I have. So I'm curious, what do you think of that kind of, I don't even want to say person, that kind of energy, that has that? Do you think it's possible for someone who's holding that level of rigidity and ignorance to shift? I know it's a dicey one.
How I think about it, and this is part of the interesting learning that has happened for me over the years, is really honoring what free will means.
Sure.
And so
It's a hard one. In that instance,
when I think about this particular individual or individuals who either make decisions to change or not change, I really have to look at it through that lens. Like, you have free will to be incredibly loving. You have free will to move, and you have free will to be terrible to people. And we have to be okay giving them the free will to be terrible to people. And that in of itself, I just like, because most people, we want people to come over to the good feeling side of the fence. We want them to come over to the good force, and to the more love and compassion. But it is a reminder that those are also the people who are our individual catalysts to say, I don't want to be an asshole. I want to move into this direction. And I might not know how to get from point A to point B, but I know I need to figure out something in order for me to move. The piece around the monkeys and making those sounds, when you brought it up, it hit so many things. Because I have been called a monkey, more so when I was a little kid.
Sure.
I used to be teased. And in that, what I recognize is that oftentimes people have a certain relationship to difference, and that relationship is usually difference is lesser than, or difference is dangerous.
Say that one more time. You cut out a tiny bit.
Difference is lesser than, or difference is dangerous.
Dangerous.
And I think what that particular person demonstrated in that incident is a lot of what has been surfacing of, there's so many people on both sides, but in the white community who see Blackness as lesser than.
Mm-hmm.
And until we address that, then it makes it really hard to move.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas on the Black side, there are a lot of Blacks who see whiteness as dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And until we heal that on our side, then
right.
we can't move. And so both of those things have to be done in their own environments.
Mm-hmm.
And then we can come together to have more candid conversations and respectful conversations.
Mm-hmm.
But unless those two pieces are addressed, then it makes it really hard for anything to shift.
I agree. Thanks for speaking to that. And yeah, the intergenerational piece is really fascinating to me. And, you know, as I'm gonna make a real generalization here.
Sure.
But
sure.
Generally speaking, there's a reason why we laugh at the white person on the dance floor, because they got no, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
There's very little flow. Their pelvises are tucked under. There's shame. There is shame in the body. They don't know how to feel. They don't know how to express. And again, I'm not an expert by any means in how the world was colonized by all the different peoples and such. But when you think of the general sense of I'm going to be very, again, general, the white man came over and demanded this, took over that. It happened here in Canada with the Indigenous population. It happened in your country with obviously the Indigenous population, slavery, etc. But it goes back to the empathy thing. For someone to do that and feel good about that and to know that that's right means that there is some real lack of flow and feeling, and there's a lot of rigidity in that cellular structure, in that genetic structure. So when I think about that man and who this woman spoke about at the drugstore, I just thought there's no flow there, because if there was, that person would feel their guts, they'd feel their heart, they'd feel where the emotional elements is, and that isn't just from his generation or his parents or grandparents. It's just been taken. So I thought about that, because I'm not sure that many, white folk will think about the reason I don't cry, the reason I don't got rhythm. You know where I'm going? It's like it's really old. And again, these are the things I've been thinking about this week. Like, where did that lack of emotional, you see a funeral with white folks, people are just buttoned up. And you even, Italians, more Latin cultures, there's dance, there's all this energy, and it's healing.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm getting excited about these
things,
because I'm like, okay. And the fear, Donnie, when I see students come to my courses, and where we live, it's mainly white, it is, and Asian and East Indian, but the terror in white people to move and to explore, it's really real. And so that there's, I just, what are your, as I was talking and giving you that diatribe, what was going on in your brain? Because something was going on.
Yeah, what was going on in my brain is similar to the conversations that are happening from the white side of, I don't want to get it wrong, I don't want to make a mistake. As you started talking about the dancing piece, that is it. It's like, I just need you to be more fluid with me. Come into the dance with me.
And then it's like, no, I need like 10 drinks. How many times do you hear that?
Let me get drunk for a second. And then
I only dance at weddings because there's free booze, and then I get the flow going.
Yeah, but I hadn't thought about it on the communication and conversation side until you just described it in that particular way. Because I think more people do want there to be a dance, because it should be equal. It should be a back and forth. It should be a give and take.
Yeah.
And it hasn't been that. And I think on the black side, part of what I'm noticing is, how do we, because we've never had this positive relationship with authority,
Mm-hmm.
it's always been master servant, or authority, what animal. It makes it hard to figure out, all right, we don't want to be your servant anymore, and we're not interested in bowing down. We're not interested in being considered lesser than. But if we speak up and say something, then we get beaten or killed, or if we don't say anything at all, then we become a doormat. So what options do we have to have a new conversation, equal conversations?
Yeah.
And I think that's where so many are struggling, is how do we just have equal conversations where we can say what we need to say and speak our piece and speak our truth without it turning into something violent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's really tough when, again, generalizing, but most aren't aware of how their nervous system regulation works. The discernment to, I'm going into defense, I'm going into shutdown. Most people don't have that education internally, that internal biology, like that felt sense, which kind of goes back to, our original, how we met. And I say, that discussion that I talked, where I was, teaching about the nervous system, and out of a room of 100 plus, only 3 people came up, and you were one of them. And you had also told me before we started chatting that you had done a talk, I think a while ago. Can you speak to that again? And the woman wasn't, I want to circle back, but I think that's an important piece to why these conversations often end up in violence, or in people just saying, screw you, I'm going to walk away. I don't want to talk about it. So it's that fight, flee, freeze is happening. And as you said, and I want to read something else that you wrote the other day, it's not getting us to a solution, to a common ground, to a social engagement that is good, even with difficulty and activation.
Yeah.
Right? There's nothing wrong with a heated conversation, but is it staying regulated? But yeah, you had said something about doing a presentation at a medical, what was it? Tell me again.
Yeah, it was a cancer organization right after I completed my training. And because a lot of that work was around navigating the emotional and spiritual side of the cancer journey, it was more about what people were feeling and their experience and visioning.
Yeah.
And so I was walking them through some of the exercises, and the head of the organization was co-facilitating with me, or she was asking me questions and facilitating the conversation. And she was just looking puzzled as I was talking about the different levels of emotions and the tiers of emotions, and moving people through this emotional journey where there's the pit, and then you have allies and breakthrough and initiation and all of these different pieces. And because most of her presenters were either physicians, researchers, or other individuals who were involved with more of the medical side of cancer treatments. I was an oddball for her.
Who's this weirdo?
Yeah. But one of the things we talked about before the conversation too was that was a big part of medicine. You know, when you think about tribal medicine, it was this intuitive, more shamanistic side. And the fact that the fact that we disconnected from that is part, I believe, of our trauma. And so now we're having to find new solutions about how we move forward and how do we heal what's happening in our body. And so you have your science-based work, but there's something also very intuitive and energetic and spiritual that you do within your work. And that's why I think it's so powerful for your community and the people that you work with. And I think now, because all of the systems and structures are beginning to fall apart, or people are at least beginning to question them a lot more, they're looking for new solutions. And a lot of those solutions are more intuitive, or they haven't been thought about it. And we need to have conversations with one another in order to figure out what those new solutions look like.
Yeah, it's so true. And, you know, in the day, if you and I were doing medicine work like this, or some, you know, alternative work, we would have been hung or burned. You know, we know that happened. And I think we have evolved to a certain point, and more people are wanting something that isn't just what we've been told we need to do for our health and healing, because some things work and some things could be much better, right? So I got a chuckle when you were telling that story about that woman, her eyes kind of glazed over. Because it's not what people expect, you know. It's like, oh, I need the hard facts and all these things. And so fascinating. I want to go back to, again, your beautiful prose from the other day. This is actually before the other one I read. This was from May 30th. And it has to do with what you call the new human experience. So you wrote, a few years ago, one of my mentors told me that part of the reason I was doing this type of healing work was because my work would be to help others move into what she used to refer to as the new human experience. At that time, I liked the sound of it, but I didn't fully get it. Now I do. We're moving into our new human experience, and I hope more continues to come along for the ride. And then you mentioned about this healing and transformational work. It's effing hard. And it's hard because it's uncomfortable AF, as we know what that means. And it often brings up tears, anger, rage, and a feeling of spinning out of control. Sadly, that's the normal experience for most healing and movement to happen. I think that goes really beautifully what we were just talking about with going into this with survival is not going to shift anything. As you said at the beginning, like you can only fight for so long until you're dead, you're exhausted, and you got no more to give. Right? So tell me about this new human experience, and you know, maybe even as a beginning to an end of our conversation for now, like if you had that magic wand, Donnie, you brought back your wizard ancestry, like how do you see, because I think intention is really important right now.
Yeah, I think so.
You know, and I think it's important for you as a Black man who's had the struggles you've had, and you've found where you want to be and what your soul's work is. It's so important, I think, to speak, all of us, to hear your intention and the intention for everyone, just as I have my intention for everyone too. But for you, what are you seeing? What's the vision? Knowing too that it's
Yeah.
going to take some time.
For sure, for sure. So the vision and the intention, and the vision that I see and the intention that I hold is for every human to come back or reconnect to their soul's joy. Like you come into this world joyful.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe part of our experience here on earth is to continue to find joy as we age and as we evolve, and it's going to look very different at every stage of our life. But particularly for the Black community, I really want the Black community to just rediscover their joy. Mm-hmm. And I know that part of that journey means grieving. Part of that journey means expressing your rage and your anger and your frustration and your sadness and your disappointment and all of those. And I think what ends up happening is you can get lost in helplessness and despair and stay down there. Or there comes a point where you say, okay, enough. Like I can't do that anymore. And that's that free will piece.
Yes.
And so every individual has to make that for himself or herself. But when I think about the new human experience on the Black side, it's really about having each one in our community feel like they matter, remember that they belong, remember that they have something special and meaningful to give. And they might have to do some digging and soul searching and testing to figure out what that's going to look like for them. But at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And on the non-Black side, my vision is really just to make space for our experience. Mm-hmm. It's nothing more than that. It's all right. You're having your experience as a half Filipino, half white woman. I'm having my experience as a Black man, and both of those are beautiful. And there's overlap between them, but there are also differences. Mm-hmm. And it's the differences that we each get to bring to the table that make conversations like this so nourishing and yummy.
Yeah, rich.
Yeah, they're rich. And I was telling one of my friends yesterday, is I don't know what happens at the end of conversations like this. I'm not trying to get to a particular destination. It's simply about making space for the conversation and saying thank you for sharing. Mm-hmm. Thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And
So really that element of honoring each person's experience.
Yeah.
And one more thought that came in, I know at least in my relationships with, say, my main partner, with my husband, there's a common trait, and I don't know if this has happened to you and your partners, but where if a person is in pain or struggling with something or stress, the partner will try to fix it because they don't want to see that person in pain. You don't want your loved one to be, in pain, whether it's emotional, physical, whatever. And I have learned, and he has learned, and we've worked a lot on this, is that, I'm in pain and your job is to not fix it, but to listen and let me cry or let me rage, not hurt myself, right? Not hurt others, not hurt our stuff, which I think is a good microcosm for the current energy in the US with riots and looting and a lot of people being harmed and hurt and property and all that. And that's another conversation. But to like the the microcosm of two human beings together, whether they're partnered, children, whatever, to just sit and acknowledge, but then ask the person who's in pain, can I do anything?
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I'm kind of feeling from your side is, you know, it's like to say we need to fix the situation means that the people are broken. And trauma doesn't mean that the person is broken, no matter it being your trauma or, you know, a million years of trauma before us. But it's that there's an imbalance, there's a lack of flow, there's a holding. And to just, you know, I think that's where I've been quiet this week, you know, this week of June 1st to 7th, because I'm like, I don't want to I'm not trying to fix anyone. And I don't think anybody wants to be fixed, but they want to be heard, and they want space and time. So that's how I what I tuned into when you were just speaking there, if that makes sense.
It does. And it's funny because a lot of the work that I worked a lot with caregivers when I was doing the cancer coaching work. And more so with the men than when the men were caregivers versus when the women were caregivers. Yeah. The men would want to fix it.
Yep, that's a common trait. Masculine trait.
Yeah. And a lot of what I was teaching at that time was helping them unlearn the fixing part of the equation and learn just the being with the equation. Mm-hmm. And so I used to say, here's some questions you can ask people. What do you need from me? Mm-hmm. What can I help you with in this particular moment? Mm-hmm. Do you need me to listen? Do you need me to help you fix a problem? Mm-hmm. And then the other person can give you their response, and they can tell you where they need you to be, so you don't have to worry about jumping through hoops to try and get to a result. And what I loved about what you just shared is that is very much what I think. I don't want to speak for all Black people because that's not true. Some are like, give me some money and land and a bunch of stuff. Yeah. But I think one of the biggest pieces is, can you just be with my experience? Can you just honor my experience? Can you just hear my experience? Can you just see that my experience is different than yours? And yes, at some point, I would like to move forward and find a solution. And I need you to be a part of the equation in order for me to find the solution, because the system has not been built for me. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, we'll have to have conversations about how we move forward together. But for right now, I'm in so much pain. I just need you to see and honor my pain.
Hey, it's Irene. I wanted to pause after these final few sentences and shares and statements that Donnie made, because they're really powerful, and maybe even consider going back and listening again at some time. But this absolute need as humans who have the animal part of us, but also the human higher brain part of us, this capacity that we do have to feel and empathize and connect and listen and know that each life, every emotion, and every quality that a person has is important. It's to be respected. It's to be honored. And I hope that this conversation has allowed you to sink into your own system and to your own traumatic experiences that may be hidden or you may be afraid of. We all are in this together. We all need healing. And I hope this conversation has offered one thing for you to sink into, to feel, to connect with. Thank you for being here. And the next few minutes will be Donnie explaining what he does, what his work is, and of course, all links to connect to him and his site and his musings will be somewhere near this video or audio. Thank you for being here. Take care and keep healing.
I'm going to put your stuff, your site, how people can get in touch with you. If someone wants to go and check you out, they can. And just as in a nutshell, what do you do for people? How do you do your work?
My life maximizer work has changed so much just within the past week. So I'm still, finding where I'm guided next. But essentially, at the core of my work, there's leadership development work, and then there's communication work. A lot of the communication work is around how do you have these compassionate and candid conversations with dignity and respect, and keep the conversation moving forward. And the other piece is the leadership development work and helping leaders think about either their work, whether if they're doing it individually, then it's helping them look at their work and the impact that they're wanting to make within their communities, and helping them package it and market it and fine tune it. Or if I'm working with teams, then that work is really about how do we create more collaborative or inclusive environments, and not just here's the strategy, here's the plan. We came together to do a workshop and retreat it. No, we're going to bring everybody into the room. We need to have some difficult conversations and some loving conversations, but then we need to look at how do we build a new container and platform for that, so that there's accountability, so that there's transparency, so that there's adaptability, and everybody can be involved in how that gets moved forward. It's not just this independent person that's coming in, I'm going to do some magic wand moving, and then
it's inclusive, integrated.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you. Cool.
Yeah.
All right,
thank you,
my dear. We will talk to you at some point.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to reconnecting with you again soon. So thank you again for having me, Irene.
You are welcome so much, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye-bye.